super excited. We have Melissa Elizondo from One Vision Capital. Super excited to have you here, Melissa.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
Awesome. So to start us off here, I'd love to hear, about your background, where you got started. I know you had some good experience before that's kind of helped you get into this space. So why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Yeah, so I was a residential real estate broker for about 12 years, and I did property management, and I used to manage well over 400 doors at one time at a few locations, some here in New Braunfels, Texas, some in Waco, and a little bit of vacation rental stuff too. I got out of the business, went into title for a little while, and then almost 7 years ago, I opened a marketing agency. So I've been in this space now for the last 7 years, but I never took my pulse off the real estate market. I always loved real estate. I loved what real estate could afford you. It definitely has no ceiling, and sometimes it has no floor too, but it's all good. And so I started flipping homes again about, I guess, 4 years ago. I was flipping homes, and then Casey Purvis, one of my partners, reached out and said, hey, why don't we get into what? First he said storage units, and we almost went that route, but then he said, how about we do multifamily? So we got into multifamily a couple years ago, and that's what we've been doing since. And I think we just closed on another 32 units this morning. So we're at about 662 doors now, I think. So
perfect. Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So what was the date you started doing multifamily? And then tell us about your portfolio today. How many units are you at?
Okay, so I started originally during COVID. Everything was shut down, and so there was a course that was offered online, and we took that course. We watched it, and I'm really a learn in person kind of person, so I understood it, and I could understand the terms were very similar to the residential market, but the language was different, but it meant the same thing, and so I really didn't dig in too far at that point. I read a bunch of books, started kind of teaching myself, and then back in January of last year, multifamily mindset came through. And so we ended up taking a 3-day in-person training with them. I invited my uncle, who is an accountant, and we did that 3-day training together, signed up for coaching. And then Casey, Curtis, and myself kind of went full force into, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so we went through their 4-week online training, talked to the coaches, and it was a year and 1 month before we ever got our first apartment complex.
Wow.
And so, and it was a little frustrating at that point because we were like, we had goals, right? Our goals were like, we're going to have 150 doors in 6 months or less. And we did have all the intention in the world of doing that. And it didn't come to fruition until later. But once it came, the law of that first deal happened, and then all of a sudden the second deal happened in March, the third deal happened in April, the fourth deal happened in June, and then we just closed on one in Orlando last month and one in Valdosta, Georgia today. So they just keep coming. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, they say the first deal is the hardest, and then once that first deal happens, it kind of just all snowballs. So I love to hear that. And as long as you're consistent, you don't give up after 6 months and be like, oh, this doesn't work.
I wanted to. I'm not going to lie. So I think it was in November. I was really frustrated. I really wanted to throw in the towel, but I couldn't because, I put my training on a credit card and I needed to pay that off. And so I couldn't give up. And I had 2 people on my team who were relying on me for, extra retirement and stuff. And so I felt this pressure of, I got to deliver. So I called one of the coaches, Amanda Dearborn, and I was like, what am I doing? Yeah. And, she really kind of laid into me that I wasn't doing the bare minimum that I needed. And so she was like, how many deals are you underwriting right now? How many LOIs have you sent out? And I think at the time I was like at 3 a week. And she was like, yeah, you need to be doing 10 to 12 because it's really 100 deals before you actually even submit an LOI. And at that point, I'd only done maybe 300 deals in underwriting. And so but it had taken 11 months. I should have gone way faster than that. And so she was like, you need to kick it in gear. And so we did. But the other thing is we switched gears. So we were underwriting a lot of deals and trying to look for our own, but
Mm-hmm.
after I was a guest on the Joe Fairless podcast, they were suggesting that I raise capital for somebody else's deal and
Mm-hmm.
bring money to the table. And that would be the way that I got my first deal. And so what happened is in December, we approached somebody we were LPs with in a deal,
Mm-hmm.
Sterling Rhino Capital. And then they said, hey, we have a deal coming up in Augusta. Do you want to help raise capital on that? And so we joined their team and was able to get some money into that deal and close on that deal in February. So that is our first deal. So it's technically not
Mm-hmm.
ours. We're co-GPs on that. We
Yeah.
just brought the money to the table to help get it to closing.
Perfect. And yeah, that's a good way to start. I hear a lot of people, that's how they do get their first deal, is getting in through the capital raising.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the story for a lot of people that I've talked to. So talking about goals and goal setting, kind of segues into the next section here. Myself, when I first got into this, which I only, started doing multifamily, end of May is when I joined Multifamily Mindset. And, I was kind of unsure of like what kind of goals are realistic to set up, in my first year. I didn't really know. And I think a lot of people that are starting in this business have the same questions. So what would be kind of a realistic goal? And should we even put a time frame on that kind of thing?
That's a very good question. I'm going to say no on the time frame, but here's where I'm speaking from. So
Mm-hmm.
I read a book last year. So when I got into this multifamily realm, starting to talk about millions of dollars and hundreds of doors
Mm-hmm.
was weird, right? Like I'm not independently wealthy, and so to talk about millions was just awkward for me. And what I realized is I had a limiting belief about money. And so I didn't think I would ever get it or whatever. I don't know what the deal was, but I
Mm-hmm.
was at a conference in Austin one night, and the sponsor who was doing a keynote that night, just in the middle of her keynote, paused and said, have any of you ever read The Energy of Money? And we were like, no. And she was like, you need to download that book. And then she just kept going. And so I
Mm-hmm.
went real quick and I put it in my notes and I downloaded it that night. And it's by Dr. Maria Nemeth. She is a psychologist. And so she wrote this book on the energy of money. And she has a workshop that she brings people through called Money and Me. And it really helps kind of get to the root of, how did you grow up around money? Were you given an allowance? Did your family talk about it? Did your family talk about bills? And so there was a lot of deep stuff that had to happen. But in this book, she makes you work through all these exercises. So it's work. It took me a while to get through it, and actually busted it out yesterday because I knew I was coming on your show and I wanted to reference the book. And I realized I never actually finished it. I went through a bunch of the exercises and there's still some more I have to do. But one of the things she has you do before you set your goals, quote unquote goals, is she has you figure out what your standard of integrity is first. And so let me explain what that is. Your standard of integrity is how you operate, kind of what's inside you naturally. And a lot of people don't really know what that is. As a Christian, I call that your gifts, but how she has you figure out what your standard of integrity is, she's like, I need you to get like 4 pieces of blank paper, and I'm going to have you sit down, and I want you on the left side of your paper, write down the people who have qualities that you admire. And then on the right side of that paper, I want you to write down what those qualities and traits are. And you got to think about everybody. I mean, there's some people that are actually in your life that you know personally. There's some celebrities, people you've heard of, authors, whatever. You just have to sit with yourself for a while. So that exercise took me a couple hours. I even had to go through my phone. I knew who the main people were, but I wrote it down, and I wrote down what those qualities were. And those qualities could be things like intelligence, loyalty, adventurous, courageous, creative, truthful, so on, whatever it is for you. And then what you'll do is you'll sort them. So you'll find that a lot of those people that you admire have similar traits. So on my list, I figured out that a lot of people I admired had intelligence, had, or wisdom, I called it, had loyalty. They were giving naturally. They loved to give more than they did receive. And so when you read this list and you say these words, some of them sit with you in a warm way, like, oh, I like that word, integrity or loyalty or whatever. And when you read that, you will find that those are your standards. because those are what are inside you. You can't even recognize them in other people unless you are them yourself. And so those words mean something to you because that is how you were made. And whenever you're operating outside of this bubble of these words, integrity, wisdom, whatever it is for you, when you're operating outside of that, that's your energy leak. And so when you're operating inside of this, that's when you form the energy and the capability to achieve your goals or your life intentions. And so what you want to do is start with that list, kind of figure out first what gets you moving, what's your energy, what do you pull from? And then what you do next is you create life intentions. So a lot of people talk about goals and, oh, I want to set a goal of this and this and that. And goals can tend to be a checklist for some people, like I want to pay my taxes, but intention is I want to live debt free so I never have to worry about a bill collector again. So that intention has meaning behind it and feeling behind it and what your standards of integrity are behind it. This is who you are. You want to operate in this space. It's your blueprint. And so what I like to do, like in her book, she helps you go through that standard of integrity and then find out what your life intentions are. So that's a whole nother exercise where you have to sit down and write down, if a genie were to grant you a wish and money and time were no object, and it may not even have anything to do with your current circumstances, what would it be that you hope the genie gave you? Like and you just write down everything. Like don't try to second guess yourself or tell yourself it's a stupid thing or too big or too small or whatever. You just dump it and you get it all out of your head. What do you want in your life? And then you sit with that. I mean, this is a long process. It took me months to get through this. Yeah. And so about 3 months into it, as I worked my way through, okay, this is what I want. Why do I want it? And you have to have a feeling behind why you want that thing. And until you have a genuine feeling, like I want to lose weight and get healthy so I could, see my grandkids or walk my grandson down the aisle or whatever it is, it's different for everybody. There needs to be real meaning and intention behind it. And then the last thing she has you do is what she calls a treasure map, what everybody else calls a vision board. And so she has you sit down with poster board and magazines and cut out everything to put those life intentions on paper. That's why I say don't have a goal, because I've had the same treasure map for almost 2 years now. Or I guess September was a year, so only a little over a year. But I've been looking at it the same. Some of those, it's been over a year. If I would have just said, this is my vision board for 1 year, I'd be very disappointed that some of these things haven't happened. But some of them are in the process for me. I'm right in the middle of my multifamily goals. I'm right in the middle of being the best grandmother I can be. I'm right in the middle of starting this tiny house community for homeless moms. Like all that started, that vision started when I started making, going through those exercises and figuring out what my intentions were. And when you operate outside of your intentions, like if you say, hey, I'm wise, but you make unwise decisions about your money or your choices, you can't operate from a high level of energy to try to get those life intentions. You're going to operate from a low level of energy. If you say that you are truthful and you find yourself doing a white lie or lying, you're going to feel it. Your energy isn't going to be right because everything says, oh, there's a hole. We got to fix it. Something's wrong with you. And so your body just does all these crazy things. But so, I say don't make a timeline. I think having, recently I read the Ed Milet book, The Power of One More. He's amazing. Love him. And one of the things he was saying is you may not always get your goals, but you'll always get your like, what did he call it? Your intentions, I think. Yeah, your intentions. And so, for instance, if you wake up every day, you probably brush your teeth and take a shower in a certain order, right? Like that is that's your baseline. And if you wake up in a foreign place, you're probably still going to go try to brush your teeth because that's just part of your routine, right?
Yeah.
You may not get your goals, but you're going to get your standards. That's what he calls it. Sorry.
Right.
Those are your standards. Your minimum standard is I'm going to brush my teeth every day. So I would say instead of saying these are my goals, say this is my life intention. My standards are I'm going to do this every day, or I'm going to do this 3 times a week, but be very specific
Mm-hmm.
with it. So one of the things he says in the book is saying, okay, if you say your goal, he calls it a goal. If your goal is to lose weight, just don't say I'm going to lose weight. I want to know exactly how much weight you're going to lose. I want to know what your measurements are going to be. By the
Mm-hmm.
way, I had no idea what my measurements would be. I've always been overweight. And so I literally went to 2 friends of mine who I admired their body. And I said, I need your measurements. Can I measure you? And they were like, sure. And so I did. I measured them and I was like, okay, this is the measurements I want. And that helps you have a very specific goal, right? Because you want your
Yeah.
goals to be,
Mm-hmm.
smart. And what is that? It's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And so yes, but those are just your task lists that you need to do every day.
Right.
Those are your standards so you can get to
Yeah.
that life intention that you have. That,
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's setting a huge foundation. What you were saying there. And I wrote down that book because I'm definitely going to buy it because that's something I'm working on right now is just clearing any beliefs I might have around money because I
mm-hmm.
don't know what they are right now, but I need to find out. So I think a book like that sounds like it will definitely get my wheels turning.
Yeah, sometimes it's not obvious. I
Mhm,
actually heard my daughter works at a place here in town, and she was telling me about a conversation that one of her coworkers had with the owner. And she was
mhm.
telling me this coworker said that he didn't trust the owner because rich people lie to keep their money. And I was like,
Wow.
what a belief, like that's your own limiting belief. And I know
Yeah.
the owner, so I know that's not true, but I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what a weird, yeah, there's
Mhm.
something that needs to be dealt with right there.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So as far as like goals come specifically for multifamily, obviously, so we have these life intentions and that's kind of like the vision, I guess, right? For
hmm
our life and
So
how we
on
want it to be.
my treasure map, my vision board,
Hmm.
it had a financial magazine that I was cutting out from. And one of her things is don't write on this board. You can
Hmm.
only cut out words and don't
Okay.
print anything. So just go with magazines.
Oh.
And the reason you want to do that is because you may be going along and see something that has that's a little better
Uh-huh.
descriptive for you. And so in this financial magazine, it said $74 million in assets. And so I don't even know what I was talking about, but I cut out those words and then I cut out a picture of an apartment complex and I
Hmm.
put it right over that. And so
Nice.
I was like, okay, this is a lot of fun. And I think you need to do something like that, kind of figure out what that is.
Hmm.
MFM has a specific number of doors that you want to own as the main
Yeah.
GP to get you to
Hmm.
your goal. And I think that going through that exercise that they have and doing that multiplication will kind of give you an idea of, okay, how
Hmm.
many doors do I want to own myself? Now,
Yeah.
being co-GP on a deal doesn't get you those same kind of returns, but
Hmm.
being the owner of the property, 150 doors is
Hmm.
pretty much what everybody wants to own because I
Yeah.
think that number equates to what, $10,000 a month or something like that, if I
Okay.
remember.
Yeah.
It's been a couple years
Yeah.
since I've taken it, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So
Well,
what is a goal more of like the daily tasks or is the goal more of the long-term vision?
so I would say I like to use the different terms, right? Like life
Mm-hmm.
intention is your long vision. Like I want to own
Mm-hmm.
$74 million in multifamily assets. That's my
Mm-hmm.
life intention. My
Yeah.
goal is that this week I make X
Mm-hmm.
number of steps towards that because you have to keep the needle moving forward, right?
Yeah.
So, like I know you do a lot of finding properties, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how many do you need to underwrite a week? How many do you need to bring to the team to underwrite a week? When I
Mm-hmm.
was in your position, that number was 10. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
out. If I didn't have enough just coming to me naturally from brokers, I was out hunting the rest of them. And so come Friday, if I haven't had sent 10 to the team, let's say I sent 7, I'm looking for 3 more. Like I'm going to go find them
Mm-hmm.
um, backwards. Yeah, I might go to Crexy or LoopNet,
Yeah.
find something that isn't quite there, but go stalk the broker, look on their website.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to call up some of the brokers I already have relationships with that I hadn't gotten anything this week on and just say, hey, I'm, checking in and asking them to send you some more. If you're if you're capital raising, if that's your job right now, or you have something you're capital raising for, how many people do you need to talk to? Do you have a certain amount that you need to raise in a certain amount of time? I will tell you, one of the craziest times I had, we were raising on a Houston deal, and we had a Zoom meeting on a Monday night, and the main GPs let us know that night on the Zoom that the deadline was that Friday. So this was a Monday night, and they were just telling us that it was that Friday, and we had no idea. We thought we had a little more time, and we're like, oh, okay. And we knew we had to raise $1 million, and we had literally 3 days to do it because it couldn't count Monday. We were doing the Zoom that night, and then we had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it had to be in by Friday at noon. I have never worked harder in my life, and we made it. We were able to raise $1 million in 3 days, but it was like so scary, and I could do nothing else, but I knew I was so driven that week. Like I knew what I had to do. And as I talked to investors, I was kind of okay, got 100,000, got 200,000. Okay. Got another 100. Let me make sure everybody gets in the portal. Let me make sure everybody wires their money. And so it was work. It was work for 3.5 days to get everybody in. And, and we did it, but we did it with intention, right? Like we just didn't let life happen to us. We told life what to do.
Love it. So
I like to say
go ahead.
I was going to say, you know how they'll tell you, like, you should budget your money because if not, it will just leave. You need to tell like Dave Ramsey says this, like you need to tell your money where to go or your money is going to tell you where to go. And so it's the same with your time. And so you need to time block and figure out, I'm going to work on this multifamily real estate stuff for X number of hours a day, or just an hour a day, but Saturday I'm going to give it this much, or I'm not going to work on Saturday, whatever you choose, but you have your standards, whatever your standards are.
Love it. So as far as, most people say you want to specialize in something, whether it's capital raising or underwriting or deal sourcing. So what kind of area do you focus on right now, and how has that changed over time?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. So I started the same seed as you. I was finding deals. That was my job. I loved it. I thought I would be really good at it because having been a broker, I'm talking to brokers, I know what I'm looking at. So I started doing that. And then whenever we had to raise for that deal in Augusta last January, I was scared. I was scared to talk to these investors. I did not want to do investor relations. I did not want to talk to investors or ask them for money. I had this limiting belief, right? I'm scared to ask them for money. I've never done it before. And then I did, and it was easy. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And it was because I wasn't selling them anything. I was giving them an opportunity to solve their problem. They needed to invest their money into something. We had a product that solved that problem, and they saw that as a solution. So they're like, okay. And so they asked a few questions. We answered the questions. A couple times I had to get the main GP on the phone, but other than that, like they were like, yeah, sign me up. Here you go. And I was like, okay, that was interesting. What happened was I started taking over marketing after that, because obviously I own a marketing agency. So why would I let somebody else on the team do that when it's so much easier for me? So I started doing social media and the blogs and updating the website. And during that process of creating content and resharing that content, I naturally attracted investors. And then I became in charge of investors. And so I gave up doing acquisitions because I didn't have time for it anymore. So I do investor relations, kind of handle a lot of the capital raising. And then I let somebody else on the team handle acquisitions now. So that's how it changed for me.
Perfect. Yeah. And what does the day-to-day look like for in the multifamily business for you now?
Oh man, it's different every day. So yesterday, for instance, I wasn't actually working on any deals, but I had a friend of mine text me, and she had a friend text her that said, hey, I saw you and Melissa are doing this commercial real estate thing. I want to figure out how to do that. And so we got on a call and started talking about it. So sometimes it comes at me from different places, and sometimes it's intentional. When we're in the middle of a raise for a particular property, I do my marketing business usually in the morning, finish up my meetings with those clients, and then in the afternoon, I'll work on multifamily for a few hours. But I do have standards. My standards are I stop working at 6 o'clock usually, except on Monday nights when I have team meetings. And so that usually goes until 8 o'clock. I have church on Wednesday nights. I have church on Sunday. I get my grandkid on Friday, so I don't work on Fridays. And so I have boundaries around, I'm willing to work really hard Monday through Friday and put in all kinds of hours and whatever I need to, but I'm going to get 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to see my grandkid on Friday. That is my standard. In fact, when we get off here, I'm going to go get him. So
Perfect. So what's been the most difficult thing that you've had to overcome since you started this real estate journey?
Just the money limitations with talking about it. I'm at a point now where talking about millions of dollars is not a big deal. You know, I can ask people very easily, you know, how much was that? What did you put into it?
Yeah.
What did you make? Like, most of the time people in this realm will share that information with me. There was a guy who bought a building downtown, and we have an office space in that building. And so I cornered him. He didn't even know me. I cornered him. I was like, hey, do you mind me asking what you paid for the building? He was like, a lot of money. I was like, what? I had to tell him I'm an investor. It's okay. You know, you can share numbers with me. I'm not, because I think people sometimes feel the need to lie about either how much they make or have, or some people try to act like they have more money than they have, you know, so there's different things there. So I think he was unsure of how I was going to react. So he's like, oh, a lot of money. I said, okay, well, I was just asking because a friend of mine put an offer in on this property for about 1.5 million a couple years ago. He goes, oh, I paid 3 times that. He goes, basically I paid, and he told me exactly what he paid. And I was like, okay, thank you, you know? And so for me, talking about millions is no big deal now, but that was a huge mental hurdle for me to get through because I didn't grow up with money, you know?
Yeah. And I think most of us haven't. So
yeah.
All right. Awesome. And what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give someone who's new, just starting out in this business, and getting into multifamily today?
So I had a love-hate relationship with underwriting so many deals. I wish after we closed on that first property in Augusta, I really wished I had done that sooner. You know, like I could have been so much further along. I don't regret any of the time underwriting deals, learning what worked, what didn't, submitting LOIs, going to tour properties. I don't regret any of that time, and I'm very glad I had it. I just wish I would have raised capital sooner. Like we could have we could be further along. And so that would be my thing. Don't be afraid to start raising capital, asking people you know if they want to invest. But I think the other thing with this, and we can talk about this another time when we talk about marketing, but people think you're, like I said earlier, they think you're trying to sell them. Like they think I don't want to ask somebody for money because I don't want them to think I'm trying to sell them something. You're not. You're giving somebody who has a need a solution. Somebody who has a high taxes, a tax shelter. Somebody who needs some write-offs, a way to write off some stuff. Like they have a problem that you are helping them solve. Like you're doing an injustice or a disservice to people, not giving them an opportunity, especially if they're qualified to invest in a deal. If you have one, you should be happy to tell everybody you know who makes a certain amount of money. They need these tax shelters. They need these benefits. And so, you know, I would just say, do that.
All right. So starting off earlier in the process, and raising capital. I think it just sounds like that's the fastest way to get into your first deal is to raise capital for someone else's deal, become co-GP, and that kind of opens the doors, like you said, for that snowball effect of all of a sudden deals are just coming and closing like one after the other.
Not only that, but when I finally got my first off-market property, there was one here in my town, and I was very excited about it. I called every one of those teammates. Every one of them. I was like, hey, will you help me take this down? And every one of them said yes. And so they're like, hey, give me financials. I'll help you. And I've been able to call on every one of those people because that's the one thing I love about this business is it takes a village. And we are a village. Like it's not as selfish. I got to keep everything to myself. Like we're sharing the wealth. We're sharing the tasks. We're sharing the jobs. We're sharing the frustrations, the obstacles. We need each other to get over some things that we don't we don't know what our blind spots are yet. Some people are further ahead of us, and they'll help
Mhm.
us along too. So that's what I love about this business.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed that is completely different from any other business I've gotten into is that everyone is so willing to share their knowledge, their expertise, and just kind of cooperate because it is a big project and it does require multiple people. So the only way, and there's a big enough pie to share, right? So that's what I love
Hmm.
about commercial real estate as well.
Yeah.
All right. So to wrap things up, where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
I'm on every social media channel under real Melissa Elizondo. You can also look up the number one Vision Capital on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you can find me there. But I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on
Hmm.
LinkedIn, TikTok, everything.
Perfect. Any final words, anything that I may have missed that you'd like to cover?
Stay humble, work hard, be kind. I'm reading the sign behind you.
Yeah.
I love it. That's it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Melissa.